Hi everyone, welcome back to my craft room. I'm Erin Thompson, and today I'm going to create for you a slimline card with some pretty simple ink blending using the Catherine Pooler oval balloon stencil. And so I'm using a finger dauber today to create a lot of the shading that you'll see in the balloons. And so you'll see I've already begun here on the red. I'm using Rockin' Red, and then I use rouge for the shading. And what I'd like to point out today is that when we think of a balloon, obviously as a three-dimensional object, the area closest to you or reflective in the sun will be the highlighted area. And so when we think of the rounded areas of a balloon, I'm going to imagine in this card that the sun is shining from the upper left-hand corner in all of the balloons. We're going to keep it consistent on where our highlights are coming from. So the bottom area of the balloon and then up rounded around the edges would be the darker shaded areas, and then the highlighted area would be towards the upper left of each balloon. So now I've moved on to the orange balloon, and what I'd like to challenge you to try and do is, for a more dramatic effect, a more pronounced shaded area, think about colors on the color wheel. And for instance, red and yellow create orange. So I have first used orange on my balloon, and then I went to a red color in my Catherine Pooler inks for the shaded area. And those colors that are next to each other on the color wheel, the darker color will definitely create a prettier, darker shaded effect. And so what I'm doing with the finger dauber is I start out by kind of pouncing the ink onto the darker areas to add the greatest amount of ink, and then I might softly swirl it and blend it into the balloon, and definitely keeping in mind where that lighter highlighted area of the balloon would be. So I had the darker colors, or definitely a heavier hand in pouncing and then swirling the ink onto the bottom area of the balloon and then rounding it up. And here you see me add a post-it note to the edge of my stencil, because the balloons that are closer to the edge, sometimes if you aren't careful, you can drag ink off onto an area that you don't want to cross-contaminate. So by adding a piece of paper or a post-it note, it kind of keeps your ink from blending into other areas. So you see how I pounce a little bit. It may not be very noticeable, or even smooth up into the darker areas to really build that darker ink up. And then you would be surprised at how easy it is to use the very edge of the finger dauber to go on those fine lines around the top rounded edge of the balloons. So I go easier with ink, and then I add more and more to build it up. And I am using Bristol Strathmore smooth paper because it's a very smooth multimedia cardstock, and it really allows you to blend inks beautifully. It's my go-to for when I'm doing a lot of ink blending. You can also, by the way, do a lot of water effects. It really takes a lot of water, and you can do a lot of really cool things with this cardstock. So there are all of my balloons, and oh, I'm just adding a purple one here. And I start with Grape Crush. And you'll notice on this one, I use that theory on the color wheel. I begin with purple, but knowing that purple is made with blue and red, I now take the darker juniper mist to blend in my shaded areas. And I just think this purple balloon comes out gorgeous. It's a small balloon, so it goes quickly. I'm using the edge of the dauber for the rounded topmost areas for the darker shading. And then there you see I have a beautiful highlighted area with the light purple. I think this might be one of my favorite balloons. I think the orange and the purple, adding in those other other colors, just the secondary color, or I wouldn't say secondary, it's the red and the blue that are next to it on the color wheel, just make a huge difference. Now I have my favorite Ink-a-Dink-a-Doo masking paper, and I'm just using the stencil to draw out the different size balloons, and then you'll see here that I fussy cut it. And we're going to use these as a mask to ink blend our sky. And I'm actually using Catherine Pooler's Melon Edge dies. These are dies that actually were created to make like a summertime melon or watermelon, but I love to use these dies to create a sky. So I create a mask with cardstock, I die cut it out, and then I take my Fiesta Blue and a life-changing blender brush, and I just softly blend ink over top of that masking stencil that I've created. This will create a beautiful ink blended sky. You see there the clouds, and obviously I'm going to move the masks as we go down the card to mask off our balloons, and then when we pull everything up, we'll have a beautifully inked background. Now something else you can do if you're creating, I wanted this to look like a very soft, beautiful summertime sky. And something else that you can do though, if you'd like to create a more moody sky or maybe a different time of the year, you can use different ink colors to help create even more depth and shading. For instance, I might add a smoky blue color or a grayish color to that sky. Even a light pixie dust will really change the overall feeling of the sky that you're creating. So think about that when you're ink blending different skies. Add different color inks to help create a different mood. So you can see I moved the masks down the card. Now I'm using a white pigment ink, and I'm going to add in just a little bit more highlights at the uppermost edge of the lightest color on our balloons. The stencil has these highlights already, so it makes it very simple. And you see how pretty that effect is by adding like a white or a light pigment ink. I'm using another finger dauber and just going down each balloon to add those. I decided that the ink was a little bit stark white, so I'm just softening it just a little bit with a lint-free towel and even some of the colored finger daubers to just soften it up and blend it in. Now I'm using the string from the Yay Gifts stamp set to add the final touches to my balloons. And I'm using the Blackjack ink. And you see I'm using my favorite Catherine Pooler acrylic blocks to do that. They're just fabulous. Now I'm adding in the Happy Birthday sentiment stamp. Right to the middle. Creates a beautifully stamped image. And there you go, all layered up. Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining me in the craft room today. You can find links for all of these products at the end of the video, and I hope you enjoyed it. Take care. Bye-bye.